Hello and a very warm welcome to this new episode of the Values Workshop. I am here with a very dear friend's daughter, Rhea Anand, and she's a beautiful kid, very wise for her age, I think. So let's check whether my thinking about her is right or wrong. Welcome to the show, Rhea.
Thank you.
To cut the suspense, we are on the letter P of the youth series. Uh, I have thought of the topic of peer pressure. Okay, and just as I was setting up a couple of minutes back, uh, an idea came to me how I want to explore this topic because peer pressure is something that is spoken about quite a lot. Uh, but the topic I want to slice it in a different manner. So let me start with an example that I have about myself presently. So whenever I post something on Facebook, uh, I have a I have quite a few writer friends who are very good at what they do, and the way they express themselves is absolutely phenomenal. The way they cover the topics, the way they write, the way they express themselves is very very inspiring, very touching, motivating. And yet, despite all these things that I feel whenever I read them, I always have this thing of, oh, I wish I was as good as this. And they have never mentioned this. They think I write well, they think I have a good mind, I have the flair perhaps. We haven't spoken about my writing skills, but most of them are very kind to me, very nice to me, and respond appropriately whenever there is an exchange of ideas. So my question to you is, if you were an outsider, as you are in this case regarding my episode, what would you think this as? Why would this be occurring?
Well, why you're feeling like you should be like them?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think a large part of why you feel like you should be them is to do with um this is linking to something that I read a while ago about different kinds of conformity and about wanting to be associated with different groups of people. And I was interested in why certain groups of people have bigger appeal to different individuals and things, and of course it has many things to do with like popularity, certain dislikes and interests that you might share with them. But I think a large part of why you might want to be in a group is because you don't want to be an outsider, and a lot of the time outsiders are viewed as like, they don't have the nicest connotations, and sometimes outsiders they can be left out, or because of the different ideas they can be kind of ignored and not really appreciated or even made fun of in some circumstances, of course. And I think it's completely natural wanting to be like someone else, wanting to be almost a different version of yourself. I think almost everyone goes through something where they see something someone else has done, and they feel a certain sense of, oh, I wish I could have done that, or I wish I could be more like them. When I think, it's obviously most people are aware that everyone has their own flaws, and it's like most people know this. Like I was saying, everyone has their own flaws. Everyone makes mistakes. Not everyone is perfect, and of course, as you mentioned, the topic of social media. On social media, people post all the good things that happen in their lives, all the nice things. They're not going to post the things that mistakes they've done, bad things that have happened, or they're not going to post the negative sides of it. And I think linking especially to social media, which is such a glamorized such a glamorized space, it's very easy for people to get sucked into this idea of self-doubt and being very conscious of themselves, when in reality most people are like that, and it's very likely that you have just as much successes and failures as the person who you strive to be.
Okay, so from another perspective, if one is the recipient of these kind of thoughts, oh, I want to be like you, uh, whatever the talent or the aspect of personality that the other person is seeking, uh, of late you've been doing little well in certain areas of your life, and perhaps there are people who would want to be in your place. And how do you see the world from there? Or there are things that you've been wanting to achieve or moving in a certain direction. You reach a certain point. Now, one of your dreams or one of the attempts that you made to uh, be something uh, has borne fruit. How does that feel vis-a-vis what you were feeling earlier while you wanted to reach this juncture?
Well, I think that again, it's so easy that obviously it's good to identify your goals and dreams. And I think it's also really it's a big step and a lot of effort to actually take steps towards achieving them, and trying to strive for them. But of course, with everything there'll be a trial and error. And again, I think when you reach certain points where you try something and it doesn't go well, it's very easy to just get like sucked back down into, oh, I'm just not good enough. And then again, go back to looking at everyone else who's done amazing things. And it just looks so easy when everyone else has done so many things. But like I was saying before, you don't see all the different trials and errors that they're all posting about. You just see the success. And this is one thing that again I think is really important, that most of the time what matters is the actual steps you take in the journey towards the destination, towards the final dreams and goals that you want to achieve. And I think recognizing that the effort and kind of the strength and perseverance you need to put into like taking all the different goals, having all the different failures and successes to achieving the dream or the whatever goal you want to achieve, then I think recognizing that and learning from your mistakes, because if you just achieve a dream by your first kind of go, I mean, it's lucky, but surely there's a better dream out there, something that's worth more, where you can make mistakes and learn from them and gain actual experience from the journey trying to achieve the goal rather than just getting to it immediately. Because I think the satisfaction, when you finally get there, will be much less with the less amounts of kind of mistakes you make along the way.
Okay. Um, what are the internal stories that one should tell oneself to be balanced in either of the cases while one is in a process of reaching somewhere, or even if you do not have a specific goal, but there is a loose idea of how you want to make your life or your journey worthwhile. And once you reach there, how do you keep the spirit alive in terms of feeling, okay, let's look at aspects that can be grown or bettered in terms of self awareness, confidence, and other things?
Mm. I think that, of course, anyone who's trying to reach their goal, it's extremely natural, and it's good that I think you can feel a bit disheartened or a bit, like a bit upset that your attempt to actually get there has failed, because it shows that you've put a lot of effort into it, and you're allowed to feel upset that something's gone to waste. But I think that it's important not to dwell on it, because I think you should really, like afterwards, you're having a little moment thinking, oh, that's not work. You should shift as quickly as possible to trying to understand the why it hasn't worked, and what I could have done better, and just learn from that mistake, learn from my experience. Like I think that you hear that so much nowadays, like learn from your experiences, your mistakes are good. But I think that it's something that's, you hear it so much but it goes over your head a lot. And I think I was also in that position where like so many people would tell me, oh, especially like during my exams and like at school, so many people tell you like, oh, your mistakes are great, you get great experiences from your mistakes and things. And I didn't really understand it until I actually started like making more mistakes, when the older I got, and I realized that the reason I was making more mistakes is because I was just putting more effort into the things that I wanted to achieve. And I think that that was when I quickly realized that these mistakes they're actually really valuable, and the lessons that I learned from these mistakes is they're going to help me to get even closer to the goal. And even if it's just something small like doing a maths question and not getting it right the first time and trying it a different way and you get it right the second time, I think that's satisfaction that you get from actually getting something right after experiencing so many setbacks. Just think about that. Like, think about, I think, like I was saying before, I think a lot of times the journey is just as important as the goal. But I think what helps you get along the journey along the way, what helps you, learn from your mistakes and just keep progressing, is to think about the goal and think about the satisfaction you'll get from going through a process like this and learning so many experiences. That these experiences, of course, they won't just apply to trying to get closer to the goal, but they'll apply to so many other things, like so many other goals or aspirations you might have in life.
Is it that easy? Once you're successful, people are celebrating you and your success at that point of time. Uh, how does one not get one's plans muddled, or uh, how does one keep one's ego in check? Uh, because this whole thing of even with the plans and stuff like that, it is my plans and I have been disciplined about it and I've worked every step for it and I deserve this success. Uh, those kind of ideas start meddling in our, if I were to call it, equanimity or balance.
Mm.
How does one internalize that, okay, there are a number of circumstances that have come together for my success at this point of time. It could be uh, my family members, my friends' support, of course, my own discipline and hard work, but the support of teachers and other people who've done things, or movies that you are inspired by, or books that you've read from another time which have kind of shaped your personality. While we would like to think it is us, how do we remember that, well, there are there are many influences which are not us, and we need to be humble or grateful.
I think that once you achieve your goal, then of course, yes, you should definitely take pride in that. I worked so hard and I've come here, like you're saying, you've put in the discipline, and the effort to actually achieve the goal, and you should definitely be happy about that and take pride in that. But I think that it's extremely important to remember the people who helped you along the way. And I think I'm just thinking about like how you do. I'm thinking about my personal experiences of where I've had people help me to achieve a goal along the way. I think that a large part of remembering the people who help you along the way is taking their advice or taking the comments they may give you about helping to progress towards the goal, and actually enacting on them and actually putting them as part of your, like, as part of the some of the things you may do to try and like get closer to your goal. And of course, if what they tell you to do, what they suggest you to do, if that actually helps you get closer to your goal, then you're not going, from my experience, you're not going to get that person. I mean, I had that. I was just talking in my experience of, I was in my school, there's a position of where you can get head student, and there's a process you have to go through of applying. You have to do an application, and then you have to do 2 interviews, and then you have to do a speech in front of the whole school. And I applied for this, and I had help from, I think, 5 to 10 people along the way, and it was ranging from my mum and my dad for my first application, having them read it through, and then it was going from to my interviews. I had my parents' friends, they were doing mock interviews for me, and they were asking me questions like the principal of the school or some teachers might have asked me in the interview, and that prepared me really well. And then finally, when I was able to get to the speech section, I think I said my speech in front of my parents like at least 20 times, and they probably can recite the speech themselves. But I said it in front of them. I asked previous head students in the school to read the speech. I was emailing them about it. I asked my friends and other teachers who supported me along the way. And in the end, I have received the position of head student by the student vote. It was honestly it was one of the, like, such a nice moment for me to experience, and I really took pride in that. But I also sent emails to everyone. I sent messages to everyone who had helped me along the way, letting them know that, a large part of what I achieved, I couldn't have done it without them. Like, I couldn't have done it without, the things that they told me to add into the speech, or what they told me to take away from my application, or maybe telling me not to say like so much in my interviews. All these things, they help me. And I think when someone tells you something and it really works, it's hard to forget it. So I think that's one way to stay in check, and when you finally reach your goal and realize that that I have so many people to thank and so many people to give credit to for my success, and I should make sure that their credits are not gone to waste or not hidden in the background of it.
Okay. So, thankfully, while you were answering, there was a strain of thought that I had when I started the topic, but I could not frame the question. I got an idea of what I want to ask. So, now this is more of a generic question, but it does apply. I want you to apply it to yourself and figure it out because it's true for all of us. Um, so when we talk about peer pressure, we are generally we get into the same thing. Like coming from an advertising background, I we play this up. You wear these jeans and you will be attractive to the opposite sex, or uh, you buy this and it will make your status seem better in the society and whatever ABCD. We look at it from that angle, but I want to look at the world itself, which is creating this kind of pressure for each one of us. So even if I am the one who's putting the peer pressure on others, uh, we are all part of uh, a kind of society which does not allow us the freedom to act differently from what is supposed to be the ideal way to behave or be. So, for example, you're a girl, you're in school, you're in college, you are working, you're somebody who loves driving, or you like late nights, or XYZ. Everything has an inbuilt pressure of okay, this is the right way to do it, and this is not the right way to do it, and it could be anything. And I'm just trying to relate it to you. It could be 10,000 other things. You're on social media, your friends tell you, oh, this suits you, this doesn't suit you, this is the kind of language you should use, or this is the kind of clothes you should wear, and n number of things. Now, that kind of pressure, if you were to look at it from this perspective, that's why I said that it is a generic perspective, true of all of us. But as a person who is stepping into the world where you are now going to take a lot of decisions for yourself, for the community, for the society, for the school, for XYZ, wherever you are, because every individual has an impact on a lot of others, even if they are not in a leadership position, kind of thing. So, my question to you is how do you view this pressure and uh, how do you keep yourself sorted in your head? That this is what I am, and I will not give in to the flow just because it is supposed to be that way.
I think that is how I don't give into the flow. I think that, of course, at all ages, there will be different kinds of peer pressure that people experience. But at my age, especially when you're saying that how I'll go into more positions of responsibility, and there's kind of a bigger sense of things that I should do and shouldn't do. I think one thing that's really important is to surround yourself with people who aren't going to be nattering in your ear about things that you should do or you shouldn't do, or like, giving you unnecessary advice that only kind of benefits them or makes them feel sort of better for just, lecturing you on something. I think because I definitely used to have people, and it's not necessarily those people who tell you those things that are like, they're not necessarily bad either, because they're probably experiencing all this peer pressure. They've probably been told by someone else that, you should dress like this, you shouldn't do this, and they're just enacting what their ideas, what they've been told onto you, either for just to make you, because they're projecting their own kind of ideas of wanting to fit in on you, or because they just kind of in some sense care for you and don't want you to be left out. So I think that making sure that you kind of stay true to yourself and don't get caught up in the flow of, what's normal, what's not normal, what people expect of you. I think a large part of it is, like I was saying, surrounding yourself with people who aren't going to necessarily always tell you what to do in situations. I think a large part of what's important is figuring out things along the way and doing it by yourself. I mean, of course, it's really good and important to have help from people, and you should never be afraid to ask for help. But I think having an idea yourself at first of, this is from my perspective, from my own identity, this is how I think I should go about this. And then maybe getting ideas from people, because there's obviously a difference between something that you'd go ahead and go, like an idea of how you would enact something versus a better way of something that could be enacted. And that idea of, how to go about something, the best way to go about something could come from like multiple different people. It doesn't just come from one person. But I think staying true to like how you would do it, like keeping with that same idea, because there's obviously, it depends what the situation is, but there's obviously so many different ways that in different situations you could go about it. But I think like staying true to your initial ideas and what you thought of it and like at first, then I think that's how you can stay as true to yourself as possible. I don't know if that made sense. I'm trying to think of an example of how I could use it. I think, okay, so using it the same example of when I was applying for the post as a head student. I was the one who wrote my application, the first draft. I was the one who wrote the first draft of my speech. And then what I did from then on was I just asked people to read it, and then they gave their feedbacks on it. They gave certain alterations, things I should add, maybe things I should take away. But at the end, the kind of same flow, the same structure of my speech and my application, it stayed the same. And again, for my interview, there's obviously, it's hard to kind of stick to the same structure of it, but at the end of the day, you're the person who's going to be giving the interview. Like my application and my speech, someone else could have written, but obviously for the interview, I'm the one who's going to be sitting in it. So that's going to be true to myself at the end of the day. But I think obviously for things like where the answers are definite, there's a yes or no, wrong or right answer, like maths or physics, I guess. But I think, of course, for the things for the situations where there's multiple different answers and multiple different ways that you could go about it, it's important that you have that go first and you understand how you yourself would go about it. Understanding that helps you stay true to yourself.
One nuance from the same question. This idea that we are what we think we are. So there are, at every age that I've crossed, I've heard this line coming from people, oh, this is who I am. And, oh, pink never works on me, oh, I never like coffee like this, and oh, first thing in the morning, if I don't get tea, I get irritated, or so thousands of things that make us individuals in our heads at least. And then we pass this information to others in the immediate circle, and then slowly, if you are really very famous, then everybody seems to know he walks like this, he talks like this, he is always like this. The nuance that I'm looking at, although it is similar to a question I asked you a couple of questions back, is how do you deal with the pressure that you put on yourself saying, okay, this is the only way I can be. So for example, I like my tea first thing in the morning most times. But there are days when I had to exercise and then come back and then have it, or go for swimming, and after my class I would do it. Or if I go to a meditation course, retreat, first thing in the morning you don't get any chai. After the first session, which is around 2 hours, after that you get breakfast and tea. I adjust. I don't think about it, and I am quite okay about it, because I have told myself it is not possible at this point of time. And yet, whenever one gets a chance, one re-emphasizes, oh, this is who I am, this is how I see things, and this is how it has to be. What do you have to say about that?
I think of course, it's so easy to get stuck into this idea of how things should be or how you like things or like the way that things are. I guess dealing with pressures that come from yourself within. I mean, the pressure of telling yourself, like for example, using your example that, oh, I have to have my tea first thing in the morning. Um, I think it's important to recognize that things can change, and not everything, nothing is going to be, not everything is determined. Things can change, things can be different and fluid. And I think that it also depends on the circumstances a lot of the time. Like, it can be the smallest things. Like you said, you're using your example. My example would be that, you know, I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I wash my face and I brush my teeth. But when I go and sleep over at my friend's house, the first thing we do is we'll chat or we'll go downstairs or we'll eat breakfast first. It works differently according to different people. And I think not I think obviously it's good to have this idea of yourself as this idea of what your identity is like, but of course your identity is a million different things. The thing that makes you who you are is endless, and I think that realizing, of course, that my identity, it has its strengths, it has its flaws, and it has its things that aren't strengths or flaws. That's just what they are, is just who I am. It's just me getting up first thing in the morning having tea. I think that realizing those things can be fluid as well, and not being so fixed upon who you are as a person. I think that's a great thing, because it shows that you're open to change, and it shows that you're open to self-criticism, not necessarily self-criticism in this situation, but it shows that you're open to things not being fixed. And I think showing that you as a person can be adaptive to different situations and not be so fixed on your identity, be willing to change. I think that's a really good quality to have, and I think that is how you can deal with the pressures of what you think you should be.
Okay, further you answer the same question, but from a completely different angle.
Mm.
Uh, so besides this idea of who we are, one of the important aspects that colors us about who we are is what we've read, what we hear, the kind of knowledge that we assimilate, and we are able to project, understand, uh, communicate to the rest of the world, saying, okay, this is what I stand for, this is what I am. One of the experiences I've had is that when one is fearful or doubtful or unsure or in the not in the know, if you understand the phrase, uh, because all your answers are wise and they are coming quickly. So what do you do in a space where you don't know and where you really don't know? You're completely stumped for answers and you do not know. That's a different kind of pressure.
Mm.
Uh, one pressure, we spoke about different kinds of pressures. If you realize, I spoke about social pressure. I talked about world pressure. I talked about uh, the pressure you put on yourself. Obviously, also the peer pressure part of it that we began with.
Mm-hmm.
But this kind of pressure where you are all your attempts to being something wise uh, or ready to face the world in that particular time and space, and you are not, but you are forced to be there. And like this question itself, if I were to ask it of myself, I personally don't have an answer as of right now, because I'm still framing the question and trying to understand the depth of what does one do. So besides freezing and worrying and despairing at our inability to stand up to the occasion, uh, what are your thoughts on
Mm.
this empty space, if I were to call
Yeah.
it?
I think that first of all, that's one of there's no rigid answer to that question. I think that that pressure of being like having no clue of what to do, of the pressure of being stuck is, I think for me, is one of the like worst pressures, or it's a really horrible feeling, and it's something that being stuck can easily just make you feel even more stuck, and like you just feel like you're not going anywhere. And I think I experience this as well, whether it's when I open an exam paper and I see the question and I have no idea what to say. I just feel like, what do I do? And then it's the pressure of being stuck, of like wasting time of the exam, that makes me feel even more pressure, and it just piles on and on. And again, this is a small example, but it can be applied to many scenarios. But I think one thing that's really good is first recognizing that you are stuck, and not just trying to, I don't know, ignore the situation or move on. Like recognizing that the current task that you're being dealt with, you don't really know how to go about it. I think that's the first thing you can do. I think the second thing you can do, well, this depends again on the whole of the circumstance, is to just, I guess, brainstorm or just literally think about anything. I mean, in an exam, when I'm stuck on something, then obviously I don't have much time. But I think what helps me a lot is to just literally think about anything, and just think about, I guess, what the whole exam is about, even if it's not about the question, just anything that comes to your mind, to help stop that stuckness, to help stop that freeze in your mind. Just anything that comes to mind, just think about it. And then eventually you get into a flow, and then eventually you realize, there's things I can do. Because I think a lot of the time you have, like, we're going back to the idea of self-doubt. It's so easy that once you see something you don't understand, you get stuck in the self-doubt area, and you doubt yourself. You don't know, you think like, oh, I don't know where to go about from here, I can't do this, and you just stop and you just freeze. But like I was saying, I think just thinking about and getting your mind out of that freeze, just thinking about anything, that helps me a lot in just getting back into reality and going back into some sort of flow. Because it's, like I was saying, it's so easy to get stuck. But I think after that, what you do after that, like getting back into the flow, it's very different for each situation. You can either ask people around you for help. Of course, going back to the exam situation, I can't do that. So what I do in the exam situation is I just brainstorm different ideas about the question. Even I just break down, like in the title, I break down the words, what each of them, like, explain, what does that mean? Power, what does that mean? And just break each individual thing down. And I think the idea of breaking a task down can definitely be applied to, like, many situations where you feel stuck. That's what I do as well when I have, so many things to do in a day, and I just feel like the world is like going to come crashing down on me. I make a list. That's what I do. You break it down, and then I make a timetable for the day, and I just go about doing that. And then by the end of the day, of course, when I'm actually doing the task and going about, getting through what I've planned for the day, I feel so much more relaxed. I feel way less stuck than I did at the beginning of the day. But I understand that, of course, things in life are much harder than just being tasked with many things to do in a day. And I think that, of course, on a much larger scale, the best thing that you can do is to break things down simply and ask people for help. I mean, that's what's helped me the most when I felt stuck in situations. I think breaking things down especially is your way of doing it yourself, which kind of relates to the idea of your own identity, and like going about things in a way that's true to yourself. But again, going to this idea I mentioned before of never being afraid to ask for help if the situation permits, I think that, that's one thing that should never be overlooked, asking people for help, reaching out for ideas, because, so many people have so many different good ideas about things that you might never know about. And of course, you have your own good ideas as well. But, joining all these ideas and ways about you should do things and not get stuck in this model can help you, achieve it in the best way possible.
So in this internal space again, where one is contemplating one's way of being in a world which is influenced by many pressures, I go back to my advertising roots, and how do you define yourself in a world that is very strictly defining you through advertising, communication, movies, specifically these areas, even social media these days?
Mm-hmm.
The impact that it has on our mind frames in terms of, oh, I need to be like this. So at the very basis, a very simplistic version would be that people are posting videos of their foreign tours and vacations and five-star lunches and uh, what's wrong with having dal chawal, for example. I'm saying,
Mm.
yeah, it is not something that I would post. I don't post any food stuff basically, but the idea of having to match up because it's a deliberate attempt by the world and the companies and the systems that we live in to try and bracket you into one form of being because they want. So if I am talking to Rhea, I don't want one Rhea because that is not going to make my profits rise. I want 24,000 of you for the number to be that good so that I can actually land up influencing you and get my brand to rise among you, influencing you very intrinsically if you realize very often because uh, on one hand I did mention the tea habit, but here then there is this kind of tea, this way of serving. It just gets madder and madder if I were to use a phrase. Uh, at your age, uh, how do you be sensible about something like this?
I think that, of course, with thinking about like who I am as a person, like your identity, you never stop like discovering things about yourself or wanting to change things about yourself. Like there's always things to be added or changed or taken away about your identity. But I guess at my age, because understanding this, there's of course so many different norms that exist nowadays around teenagers and things that you should do, shouldn't do, like certain ways you should look, certain ways you should dress, how you should act, and I think that being sensible about it, being sensible about not getting so sucked up in all these different things is extremely hard. You always hear the phrase like, "Oh, be yourself," but that when I hear that, I always leave me wondering, like, I don't even know who I am yet. Like, it's hard to I think it's extremely hard to not get sucked up into these things, and I have definitely been part of like where I've just done something to fit into a norm or just done something because I don't want to be an outsider, like most people have. But I think realizing that a lot of it is, of course, going back to this idea of peer pressure, a lot of it is because you want to impress your peers. A lot of it is because you want to, fit in. And I think that this idea of getting to know people first, like getting to know people who are actually true to you and people who actually like you and like you for who you are. And of course, there's still this idea of like, who am I? I don't know who I am. But I guess getting to know people, getting people to understand who the present version of yourself is, and then going about from there and then building relationships from this and understanding who each other is at that moment, like, a mutual understanding of both who you are. And that's, of course, for just one relationship. But I think building that onto many people and having more people, knowing that you have more people support the true version of you, can definitely help break that idea of wanting to fit into other groups of people. And it's extremely hard to find people like that. I mean, I'm a very lucky person, I can say. Both my parents are very supportive of who I am, and they're very loving parents. And I have, over the years, built a really nice set of friends as well, who, they know me for who I am. I'm not necessarily at school. I'm not someone who's always quiet. I'm not someone who's like, I am, of course, I'm a good student and I'm not screaming around in lessons and stuff, but I'm not someone who's like a quiet person at school. And I think that was initially, of course, how everyone starts when you join a new school. You're being quiet. You want to fit in. You don't want to come across as too like brash or like noisy or loud or anything. But again, just finding that group of people who find you funny, who will love you, who like, who are confident in who you are, knowing that other people are confident in you are, definitely helps your own your own sense of self-confidence, and also the idea of, not just fitting into random trends and things, because, like I say, everyone says this, that everyone is different. And I think really thinking about that and relating that to the idea of social norms and stuff, that, you know, these social norms are created because everyone who's in those norms is kind of fitting in because they're almost too scared to go out of them, even though they're their own individual person. You know, going to the idea that everyone is different. The only reason that people, I don't know, start these norms is because the idea of what should be the norm, what should be like the standard for everyone, gets bigger and bigger and gets more normalized. And your idea of, like, you know, being different just becomes, you know, it has negative connotations of, you know, being different. But like I was saying before, just having people who believe in you, which again, it sounds cheesy, but I find that that's the thing that helps me the most not get stuck in, you know, the different norms that go on. Having people that are okay with me being different. Like, of course, there's this whole idea, there's this understanding that you yourself should be content with being different before thinking other people are. But I believe that a large part of it is having people who also believe in yourself and are confident in your differences too.
A trick question. Uh, Me and my kid have a lot of discussions about what is good parenting or what is good adulting, in the sense that she thinks a lot of adults get away with things uh, because of their age and their powers that they have compared to the young. Uh, what about parental pressure of, oh, this is what it means to be a good kid, or this kind of kid, or that kind of kid? Uh, it's a kind of pressure, right? Or do you not agree on that?
No, I think that is definitely a kind of pressure. I mean, I don't think I can offer a exactly like correct or true view on this, not being a parent myself. But from what I can imagine, I think that the idea of what a good kid should be, like, that's again just just a different type of, you know, a certain pressure that everyone kind of experiences. But that specific one of, you know, how to raise children or what a good kid should be, um, I think that, of course, there's this everything with, whenever you raising each individual like family is going to be different with their styles of raising and such. I mean, of course, you have common practices within different cultures of how to raise children. And I think that that applies a lot to how the child eventually turned out to be. Um, but I think this idea of like what it is to be a good kid, I think that's just something that it's a trial and error along the way. And I think the pressure, of course, of what a good kid should be is something that, you know, all parents will be experiencing. Um, but again, it's something you just figure out along the way. It's different with each situation, you know. Um, some parents may have children that are harder to kind of that are harder to calm down, or who have tantrums more. Some parents have children who are more, you know, suited to academics and they're more talented in math, whereas others have children who are like excellent basketball players or something. And I think this idea of what is a good child, or like, or how to raise a good child, is, like I was saying, it's different. And I think the true basis of what a good child should be is different for everyone at the end of it, once they realize that, you know, this idea of what a good child should be is different. I mean, of course, many people think that it's being, you know, it's being getting all straight A's, being a very disciplined child and everything. But a big part of it as well is it's not just that. It's obviously not just this typical idea of what a good child, what a good, I guess, student in the sense is, but, you know, being nice, being kind. Of course, that's all really important. That's all something that, you know, a child who's nice and kind and loving is something that a parent should be proud of. But it's not always easy to get there. And I think realizing that this idea of a good child can be really different for each parent, and what a parent can be proud of for their child, like, it can be really small things, it can be really big things, and it shouldn't be determined by this like small construct of what a good child should be.
Uh, I was thinking I should re-christen the episode "Pressure of Being You" rather than
Okay.
peer pressure, because we have very successfully talked about a lot of different kinds of pressures. Uh, One last question that comes to mind is, uh, with this amount of information overload that we have from uh, from all aspects of life. So, if I were to combine all these questions that I asked you, from we have some knowledge socially, some from coming from friends, some coming because of your age. A very recent series is gaining a lot of traction in terms of discussions. Adolescence. I don't know if you watched it. So my question comes from, there is this whole idea of, subsuming oneself and saying I am part of this group, whether it is age based or color based or uh, nature based, whatever, astrology based, whatever, any base that you find of coming together with people. I find there is one flaw in this thinking. So if I start thinking I'm this many years old, I belong to this religion, I have gone to this kind of college, I have this kind of knowledge, uh, I practice ABC, whatever. Uh, there is this whole thing of not thinking through and taking the, and this, in this sense, the pressure is enjoyable. So because you belong to a group, you start forgetting that you have an individualistic point of view about ABC, whatever that might be, and you feel very happy. So there is this girl gangs, and these are these guys saying girls are mad, and girls are saying guys are like this, and there are caste system in India is operable. So people belonging to one caste will think that the others are all like this. And while a lot of generic truths uh, happen, I will not disconnect from the reality of, on the ground. There are people uh, who are like that, but I'm saying we are individuals, and there is this slicing it to the core that you might be somebody else. Uh, like adolescence, in case you've seen the series, one interesting thing that I kind of realized was that everybody seemed right about their point of view, or wrong, depending
Yeah.
on how you see it in that scenario. Like in the immediate, they could be wrong. Like uh, they vandalize his van, or you know, at that point he's very angry, but he cares for his family. It's not that he's unaware that he wants to let them have a good time. So he ends up creating some kind of thing. Let's just call for some Chinese home or whatever, whatever. But just the idea of settling down with this conflicting parts of our personality, and the fact that there is more to us than we define. How do you, I know it's a very longish question, and I'm not even, I'm fumbling with words, but the idea being that while we may be part of a group, the group does not define everything about us.
No.
How do we, and in a world which is being polarized very strongly in every possible way, everything is a stamp, I am this, I am not this, I am this, I am that. How do you, how do you cut out this pressure and breathe easy? This comes from a peace point of view, not even, you don't need to go and tell others that you are this or you are not this. I'm not saying go out and fight and proclaim to the world that this is where you stand.
Yeah.
So, do you have something to say on that?
I think that a large reason why it's so easy to get sucked into being part of a group or being part of a norm is because it's so hard to kind of think about yourself and create an image of yourself or what you should be, or like basically create your own identity. And I think, of course, this idea of identity is something that everyone struggles with, and everyone has like different like has conflicts with it. But again, like going back to this idea of making sure that you know who you are, like it's much easier said than done. And of course, like I was saying, it's important. I think it's important to be like when you're in groups of people, be with groups of people who have confidence in who you truly are as well. Um, but you're not always going to find people like that's hard to find people like that, and you have to connect with people for them to truly know you. That takes a long time, and it's more, there's a lot more circumstances in life where you'll find yourself with people who, you know, you're not as familiar with, or with people who who don't understand who you truly are. And in that situation, it's very easy to just conform to what they're saying, and it's very easy to just follow whatever norm they're saying. And then again, this can apply to when you're trying to figure out your own identity. Like it's very easy to just go along with a different group, like saying, "Oh, I'm 17 years old. I live in England. I'm a dog owner." Like, of course, these are things that define who I am. But and they're things that obviously is a part of who I am, and they're things that mostly at this present time they're not going to change. But I think looking at the more abstract parts of your identity, there's so many different, like, again, I keep going back to what I was saying before, but there's so many different parts of who you are. There's a million different things that define your identity. There's so many different emotions that you feel probably all in one day. It's like you feel angry, happy, sad, very generic ones that I mentioned, but those are most emotions that what you feel going about each day. But every day is different, and you have different feelings, you go into different situations where they elicit different feelings from you, different responses. And I think going back to the example you used in adolescence of like different ways almost you could react to things, or choosing to do so or not to do so because of the group you're currently with. I'm thinking of how to go about with what I'm currently thinking. I think that recognizing that you have all these emotions and that you have, multiple different levels to who you are is it's a great first step. And I think obviously understanding that, who I am is not going to be a fixed kind of idea. I think that's also really important as well. But I think most of it is just being okay with this idea that, who you are as a person is going to always change. And I think what helps me deal with it, and what helps me, not get sucked up into all these norms and things, is to have things that I just do by myself, or to have like activities or doing certain things that's my own time, like whether that's reading or that's just, even if it's just like looking forward to going to bed at night and in your own bed and just being by yourself. I think being content with being by yourself is a large part of it, and I think that's a big part of understanding who you are, is not just wanting to be in a group all the time, because of course, like I was saying, the idea of who you are it can be scary, but actually being with yourself and just having alone time, it can help you. I mean, it helps you discover, the things that you like, the things that you don't like, and it's relaxing. I mean, I know that it's not this for everyone, and I definitely used to be like this person who had really big FOMO. I had lots of fear of missing out. I would go to all these plans, see all these different people, because I just feared missing out so much. But I think now, like, of course, I still have so much to learn, and I'm not saying this in a way where like I'm in this place where I'm happy now and I'm finally finished. Like, no, I still have so much to learn. But like, going back to example, like, I really look forward to going to bed at night, because that's just me in my bed. Like, either that's me reading something or watching an episode of a show or something, and just, I guess, being by myself. And also, I think one thing is that I look forward to those few minutes where I'm starting to go to sleep, because that's where I have no distractions. All I'm doing is I'm just with myself and my own thoughts, and trying to quieten them down before I actually go to sleep. And I think, of course, thinking about the whole day and everything, that's something that you do in your small bits of alone time you have throughout the day. But I think for me, that's one of the only times in a day where I'm actually truly alone, with no social media, no phone, no friends. It's just me and my thoughts, and I'm just, getting ready to go to bed. And most of the time, whatever I'm thinking then, I'll always forget it the next day. And I think that having that idea of you shouldn't always get fixed on things, going back to the idea you shouldn't always be stuck on the same thing, I think that helps me a lot in kind of just being content with who I am as a person and not wanting to just, ponder on things for too long or think about, I guess, on the larger scale, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have worn that dress that day, or maybe I shouldn't have done these things. Like, just, I guess a large part of it is just not caring so much. Like, of course, it's important to care, but I guess this is a really cheesy thing to say, but you only live once, and like you told me as well, like yesterday, there's so many things that it's not worth to waste your brain matter on. And I think that the idea of fitting into norms and the idea of who you should be isn't something that you should waste your time thinking about. It's something that you discover along the way. And most of the time, once you discover something you like about yourself, or something that you enjoy, you don't like, something you change, you don't think to yourself, oh, this is a new part of my identity. You just go along with it. And I think that's something that you should just apply to lots of different scenarios, just going along with things, because that helps you a lot not to get sucked into the different norms and groups that it's very easy to be sucked into. Sorry, I was really long-winded answer, but I hope that had some sort of sense in it.
No, not at all. In fact, I was thinking you lived up to the introduction that I gave, that you're wiser beyond your years, and it's such a wonderful head that you got on your shoulders in terms of these are not easy questions to deal with. Honestly, even on a podcast with the kind of provocation that I do, immediate answers don't always come to mind. Uh, we might be forced into answering something because this is that kind of format. Uh, and yet you've done very well for yourself. I'm very happy and very privileged to have your company on the podcast today.
Thank you. It was a privilege to be on it.
Thank you so much.